The boys are in Parliament. The Fantastic Five take over. Have a look at these glorious pictures, which just bring to mind so many little quotes, don't they? Nigel Farage, the most influential politician of his generation, the man who inspired Brexit, the man who the establishment thought would be permanently defeated by the first-past-the-post system, finally with a seat in Parliament. And he's brought his rabble-rousing mates along for the ride. But they're having a lot of fun on the way as well.
So on the way in this morning, I drove past my old school. And I remembered September 1974, walking into this great big historic place thinking, gosh, well, I'm a few years older now. There are 5 of us. Luckily, Lee knows where we're going. Otherwise, we would be completely and utterly lost. If anything goes wrong today, it's down to Lee Anderson.
Now compare their demeanour to that of any serving Conservative MP today, and there's a stark contrast, of course. But there is hope in the air for those who fear for our country. The revolution is coming, definitely from reform. Nigel is up for a real fight, not just with Labour and the Tories, but with the crooked and corrupt MSM too.
Maybe only 5 of us, but we're very united.
You're going to be voting with the Conservatives on measures to do with migration, do you expect?
Do you mean the party of mass migration? Do you mean the party that have increased the population by 6 million since they came to power? I don't understand the question.
And are you going to be giving Labour a tough time when you can?
We'll do everything we can to hold the elected government of the day to account. And remember, 1/3 of the vote, 2/3 of the seats, they don't really have that much authority.
Of course, you and your fellow Reform MPs actually in the building for the first time, waiting for your new offices. Describe what it's like today, meeting all the MPs, and it was your eighth attempt. You must have thought it may never happen.
Well, second serious attempt.
8th attempt, she just had to get that in there. Second serious attempt, he just had to get that in there. So where does all of this hysteria and excitement around reform leave the Conservative Party? Well, I've been having the most fascinating conversations over the past few days that I want to tell you about, because it's becoming clear to me that the world's most successful political party is facing an existential crisis. Out of touch with its membership, many of whom voted for reform out of total desperation after a series of bitter betrayals, wet and woke MPs for some reason continue to follow Rishi Sunak's failed doctrine, a move to the centre, trying to compete with the Lib Dems, giving up on the red wall, giving up on red meat, small c Conservative policies, accepting mass immigration as a necessary evil. And if the Conservative Party continues down that path, then it is dead. Those conversations I've been having, by the way, include household name Conservatives, some of whom are speculating that the party may have to die, that Nigel Farage's Reform UK might become the vehicle for true conservatism over the next decade. Others, though, who cannot stomach Nigel are advocating for the creation of an entirely new party. So this fight for the leadership, right, it's going to be bitter. Indeed, last night, Superwoman Suella Braverman, a true Conservative, plunged the party into a civil war with a barnstorming address at the NatCon conference in Washington, D.C.
Our problem is us. Our problem is that the Liberal Conservatives who trashed the Tory party think it was everyone else's fault but their own. My party governed as Liberals and we were defeated as Liberals, but seemingly, as ever, it's Conservatives who are to blame.
But I thought what was most interesting is what she said about her fellow leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick afterwards. This is what she told the Daily Telegraph. He definitely comes from the left of the party. He voted for Remain in the Brexit referendum. He was a big kind of centrist Rishi supporter. I remember talking to him about leaving the ECHR a year ago and him looking horrified by that prospect. It's really good that he's moving in a different direction. Wasn't the story that he was sent by Rishi to keep an eye on me in the Home Office? So she's up for a fight, but MPs are doing all they can to stop Suella. I think they should think again. I mean, listen to her laying out her case at today's PopCon UK conference.
It's no good denigrating Reform voters. It's no good smearing the Reform Party. It's no good comparing Reform rallies to the rallies of Nuremberg. That's not going to work. Briticising people for voting Reform is a fundamental error to make. Historically, in British politics, we have had the monopoly on the right-wing vote. That's one of the reasons why we've been so successful politically. The left, by contrast, for the last 100 years, has been split. Left-wing voters have had a choice of party to go for. And we, by contrast, have had the luxury of a monopoly, but no longer. And that is why the Reform Party presents an existential threat.
Now, among the public and certainly Conservative members, Superwoman Suella is the big hope, sort of like the Marine Le Pen figure of British politics. And I have a real feeling that if she is rejected again by the Tories, she will be lost to Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Now, though, our uncancelled interview. And Spartan Brexiteer Mark Francois, well, he was one of the bright spots, actually, on election night for the Conservative Party. He romped home in Rayleigh and Wickford. However, it is fair to say the Reform UK candidate was in second place, but didn't provide a real threat. So where to now for the world's most successful political party? I mean, Mark, look, number one, what a result. Given the circumstances, my goodness, you must have been relieved, because you are one of the few Conservatives who actually are left with a relatively comfortable majority. However, as I said, Reform was bubbling up there in second place. So do you agree with what Suella Braverman said there, that your party is now facing an existential crisis because of Reform?
Well, Dan, let me give you a world. By the way, it was a grueling campaign. And I'm very grateful to my constituents for re-electing me. I'm just about to go and take the oath of allegiance, so I should put that on the record. Let me give you a world exclusive. In November 2022, so not long after Rishi had become Prime Minister, I led an ERG delegation that went to see him in the Cabinet Room at number 10 Downing Street. It included IDS, Sir Bill Cash, Sir Bernard Jenkin, David Jones, Lawrence Robertson, all of our kind of leaders within the ERG. And we put two very specific points to Rishi Sunak across the cabinet table. One, we warned him very clearly, politely, but very clearly, that he had to do something about the boats and immigration. Mm-hmm. Because for years, we as a party had talked tough on immigration, but the numbers had gone the wrong way and not the right way. And the public would not forgive us if we didn't reverse that. We were very clear about it. And secondly, and at the time, to give it context, Reform were on about 4% in the polls. Yeah. We said that if we didn't do something about Reform, they could be an existential threat at a future general election. And we were, the tone was polite but firm, and he didn't listen to a word we said.
Goodness. So you warned him of all of this?
We absolutely, it didn't leak. I'm not making it up. There were a lot of us there. I could, provide corroborating witnesses if you like. Craig Williams was there as PPS, who kept trying to close the discussion down because he could see Rishi wasn't comfortable with it. But that's the discussion that we had. So I told you so.
Yeah. But are you angry now, Mark? Are you angry? Because look at what that decision has done to your party, the world's most successful political party.
Dan, I won't lie to you. I'm not chuffed. I've seen many of my friends defeated, and Nigel bears some responsibility in that. I'll come on to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. It was an absolutely grueling election, and we had no warning. Most of the party, we thought we might have to fight a general election in May. We were prepared for that. Then we were stood down. Some of us had local elections. We worked very hard for those. Then we thought we could breathe out, and everybody expected it to be in the autumn. And the PM famously said, you can book your summer holidays. And then bang, we're thrown into battle with absolutely no warning whatsoever. And the party was clearly not prepared for it. And you saw the consequences. So that is what happened. On Nigel, Let me just give you my
because
personal...
you're friends with Nigel, right? You're personally close.
Yeah, I've known him for years. He invited me to his 60th. But, he's still responsible for the loss of a lot of good Tory MPs, at least partly. So, but let me speak frankly. We never handled Nigel, if handle is the right word. We never treated Nigel correctly after 2019. Because in 2019, he calculated correctly that after 3 years of trench warfare in Parliament, and that's what it was, we would only be able to leave the European Union if Boris won and won well. He was right. So he stood down his candidates in Tory incumbent seats. And as I understand it, within what was then the Brexit Party, this led to screaming matches. Some people had paid 10 grand towards their election expenses. All of their literature had to go in the skip. And then after but he put country before party. And Boris won well. And then afterwards, there was all this discussion about, should we have given him a knighthood or should we have given him a peerage or made him a companion of honour? We didn't even give him lunch.
No.
And
huge
Boris,
strategic error.
Boris, being Boris, pocketed it. I think there were people in the background who advised him to do that. So human nature being what it is, I can well understand why Nigel was very angry.
Do you mean Dominic Cummings in the background? Because let's just be honest about this, Mark. Cummings hated Farage. And so a lot of that personal animosity led to the way that the Tory party treated Farage.
Well, I think Dominic hates a lot of people.
That's for sure.
It's a long list, isn't it?
I think you're probably on it.
But probably am. But anyway, so for whatever reason, the Tory party didn't say thank you.
Yeah.
And so you can understand why this time round, when some of my colleagues were saying, oh, well, do you know, if I know Nigel, do you think we could get them to stand? And I said, no, guys, because the way they see it, and by the way, Dan, for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not defecting to reform. I'm a Tory.
Did they ask you?
No, Nigel never has. No.
Richard Tice or anyone else?
No, I had some people on my Facebook page saying I should defect to reform during the election. I mean, ironically, a lot of these were bots that came from Nigeria. There's an irony in there somewhere.
But you would not even consider it, Mark, no matter what happens over the next 5 years. What if you get Tom Tugendhat leading you? Are you seriously going to stay a Conservative MP?
Dan, I don't think on the election, but let me just finish my point.
Yeah, of
course.
Because
I hope you don't think this is arrogant, but I think it's an important point.
Please.
This time round, there was going to be, if you like, no mercy. Because even though I wouldn't join Reform, I know some of their people. And their view was, there's no point doing a deal with you, because look at what you did last time. So we're just out to get you now. We tried to do, quotes, the decent thing as they see it, and we got nothing back. You just pocketed it, so now we're coming for you. I mean, I paraphrase, but you understand my argument.
Yeah.
And that's why nobody got a buy. Irrespective of their Euroscepticism or their track record on Brexit or any of that, or even personal friendships. We all, with one or two exceptions where people dropped out or there were nomination cock-ups at the last minute, but essentially just about everybody had a Reform opponent. And some of those were just pure paper candidates. But they still got a lot of votes because of Nigel's air war, if you see what I mean. So where does that leave us? Well, Nigel is now in the House of Commons. He always had a way of making his point in the European Parliament. I'm sure he'll attempt to do the same. Although I think what I would say is I think he'll find the House of Commons is a bit different from the European Parliament. It's not the same on a whole range of levels. But
did you see today that he's already attacked John Bercow in his first speech in Parliament? Now, I thought it was funny and I thought he made a great point, but do you think that was inappropriate?
I think he got the tone wrong. The tone was about congratulating Lindsay. if I'm
Lindsay
honest.
Hoyle, who is
Yes,
having another term as speaker.
But that Nigel always says something controversial so that people like you can report him. He does it every time. He's a past master at it. So he knew what he was doing. Anyway.
And he's there to challenge the establishment, isn't he?
Well, I know, Dan, but you asked me my opinion. I've given you an honest answer.
Fair enough.
With regards to the future and the leadership, and then I'm sure, Mark's been very patient, Mark Littlewood. But with regard to the future and the leadership, I don't have a preferred candidate. I don't think we should rush. We've just suffered a very heavy defeat. I think we need to be humble and reflect on what went wrong, and then pick a new leader in the autumn, perhaps after the party conference. If you remember, in 2005, we used the conference a bit like a hustings, and that's when Cameron emerged. And I think maybe we should do something like that again. I don't think we should, given the scale of the defeat, I don't think it makes sense to rush our fences.
Mark, it might surprise some people, though, given that you are a Spartan Brexiteer and that you have served on the ERG alongside Suella Braverman, that you're not automatically backing her.
No, I'm not automatically backing anybody. And I come back to my earlier point, Dan. Spartan, all the rest of it. Nigel Farage once said at a public event, "Thank God for the Spartans." Still stood a candidate against me, though.
Yeah.
So don't expect Tory MPs who've just been through an incredibly grueling 6-week campaign to shower Nigel Farage in love. I don't think that's going to happen, Dan. And with regards to the leadership, my personal view is I think we should wait till the autumn. Suella will no doubt be a candidate, as will, we all know who the most likely names are. It could be, as in 2005, someone emerges from out of the ranks. Cameron kind of came from nowhere and, stole it. Who knows what will happen? But I just think that given the scale of the defeat, we as a party need to have some humility here. And we need to reflect and not rush into doing something. We picked Rishi. It was a coronation. Look what happened to that. I believe our members have to have the final decision. They have to pick, the voluntary party slog their guts out without any strategic warning for 6 weeks. If some of my colleagues who think we can take the decision on the leadership away from them, well, then those people will quite rightfully tell us where to stick it.
Yeah.
So in return for everything they've done, a grueling 6-week battle, the least we can do is reassure our party members that they will choose who will be the next leader of the Tory party. And that means a hustings at the conference. And that means allowing members to go and actually see everybody. No more coronations. We've had 2 coronations in recent years. One gave us Theresa May, the other gave us Rishi Sunak.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more when it comes to the membership. Final question, Mark.
So we must let Mark Littlewood have a go. I know it's your show.
Absolutely. The final question to you, and I've got to ask it, the Boris question. He has tweeted today criticising the Labour government already. Very powerful, strong speech, slamming them for getting rid of the Levelling Up department. Could you see him return? Is Boris the answer in any way to the Conservative Party's troubles?
Well, as I understand it, Boris is making millions of dollars a year out in the United States. He's getting paid a fortune, to do a 20-minute turn, for the Cincinnati Round Table or whoever they are. So the idea he's going to give that up for 91 grand a year, I find challenging. But with Boris, you never quite know. I mean, I'll just add one last thing, and I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous after the scale of the defeat, but I'll make you one prediction. We now live in an age of politics where people are used to ordering whatever they want on their phone, and if they don't get it within 48 hours, they think they've been hard done by, right? That's the world we now live in. So I think by the time we get to mid-term, it's possible, I only say the word possible, that there could be massive buyer's remorse among Labour and among the electorate. Labour are going to be, there are a whole bunch of client and interest groups who expect Labour to perform miracles. And if and when they don't, I think you might see those polls shift quite dramatically, possibly even within the space of the first Parliament. Why do I say that, Dan? Because if on the morning or the lunchtime on the 13th of December 2019, when Boris had won an 80-seat landslide and Corbyn had been reduced to 198 seats, who would have, if I dare talk about electoral betting, who would have bet that at the end of that parliament, the new parliament, Labour would win with over 400 seats and a gigantic landslide? So my point is, electorates are very volatile now.
Yep, I totally agree. Look, Mark Francois, I know you've got to go and get sworn in, but absolutely delighted to have you here for the Uncancelled.
And it's great to have you back on air, Dan, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mark. Absolute pleasure. Speak soon. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please do subscribe if you want lots more clips and interviews like that. Plus, if you want to watch our totally uncensored after show, then visit www.outspoken.live.